Hello, everyone. I am Kassem, and welcome to my workshop, Surviving a Mental Health Pandemic, How to Get Through It and Not Around It. Welcome to the SDG Global Festival of Action. Some of you are joining us inside the Zoom webinar, and some of our participants are joining from the festival's virtual event platform. Welcome to everybody. Before we kick off, a little bit of housekeeping has been provided by the UN SDG Action Campaign team. Number one, please all note that this session is part of the SDG Global Festival of Action. So if you are joining here directly in Zoom, we strongly encourage you to log into the event platform afterwards. We'll share the link in the chat if you don't have it already. You can then benefit from joining any one of 6 stages, meeting and connecting with others in the connection zone. And you can also check out up to 20 exhibits and find additional information in the resource library. Number 2, by joining this webinar, everyone on the panel consents to their image and audio being broadcast. For those of you joining via Zoom, we have the opportunity here to promote participants, to be featured on the screen with their cameras and mic on. If we do that, you also automatically give your consent. Number 3, we have strict broadcasting regulations here. So if anybody is promoted to have their mics and cameras on, no logos, flags, or music are permitted in the background. And finally, if the broadcasting regulations are broken, unfortunately, we'll need to remove participants. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I will please ask you to avoid raising your hand. If you have any questions, you can please put it in the chat or the Q&A function, and I will leave time at the end for us to go over the questions. So I would like to start off by asking you all a couple questions. Let me send this out. And I would like you to answer this question. In the past 6 months, which, if any, have you experienced? Please select all that apply. Okay. I'll just give it a few more seconds and we'll end the poll. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so let me share these results. As you can see, 70% of you responded that you have experienced low mood or irritability in the past 6 months, followed by anxious or recurring thoughts, and then disturbed sleep, and emotional eating, decreased or increased appetite, and frequent headaches or physical pain. As you can see, actually, the percentages are pretty close together. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you another question. I would like you to answer what has been the biggest help or source of support for you this past year. Again, I'd like you to select all that apply. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the results. So Wow. And 84% of you said that friends or family have been the biggest help or support for you this past year, followed closely by self care, which exercise, yoga, and meditation. And then we have self help books or materials at 27%, your job at 22%, and finally, psychotherapy at 12%. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for answering these questions. It was really important for us to see what has been happening for us this past year and what has helped you and what we've all been experiencing. As you know, this workshop is all about our mental health and looking at what has happened on this 1 year anniversary of the pandemic and what we need to get through this next year and how to actually get through it and not around it. A year that everybody is calling the mental health pandemic. And so, let me start by just sharing my screen here. Okay. So I wanted to start off by talking about what exactly is mental health. Now, instead of giving you a textbook definition, I wanted to read something to you. I like nonsense. It wakes up the brain cells. Fantasy is a necessary ingredient in living. It's a way of looking at life through the wrong end of a telescope, which is what I do. And that enables you to laugh at life's realities. And this quote is from good old Dr. Seuss. And I think it's important for us sometimes to take things a little bit lightly and to really think about how we want to look at life. So thank you, Dr. Seuss, for that. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to see. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know what this is. Depending on your age, you might know it, you might not. This is a slinky. And I want you to think of us as people being this slinky. So here's what happens. Usually, life happens and things get thrown at us. And sometimes we get stretched a little bit. And because human beings are naturally resistant, we bounce back. And sometimes there are bigger things thrown at us and we're stretched out even more. And then again, we bounce back. Now, here's what's happened in this past year because of the pandemic. Things have been happening and happening and happening and happening, and we've been getting more and more stretched. And the problem is because it is so chronic and because it is so intense, we're not having the time or the skills sometimes to be able to bounce back. So what's happened? We're just getting stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched, and we're in this constant state. And for some people, they've become so stretched that they've actually broke. And so what I wanted to talk to you about today is why this has happened. And we know that there are some obvious culprits. We know that we've been all living in isolation. We've been feeling lonely. We've had a loss of safety and security. Some of us have lost our jobs. We're living in fear of infection, of disease. Some of us have lost loved ones. This whole idea of losing the sense of control and this constant change has left us feeling very unsettled, as you could see from the poll. We've all witnessed social injustice, violence, aggression. It's a difficult state to be in. What I want to bring your attention to is the not so obvious culprits. We are all grieving. We are all in mourning. Some of us are in fact grieving loss of loved ones, but we are all grieving a past life. We're all mourning the life that we had before this pandemic, because everybody's life has been turned upside down. Everybody is going through major change. And this has consequences on our mental health. We're all experiencing what we call collective trauma. What's collective trauma? Very simply, long-term psychological symptoms that a big group of people experience. And we all know it's not very common that almost every person on the face of the earth is going through the same thing at the same time. And so definitely we're all going through this collective trauma. And a third culprit is something that I wanted to share from the very famous psychotherapist Alfred Adler, who invented individual psychology. And he talked about the two basic human needs that we all have. And those are the need for a sense of belonging and a sense of significance. And because of the pandemic, these two have become unmet. Now let's take a closer look at each of these. We've all, like I said, been grieving. Most of us are familiar with the 5 stages of grief from Kubler-Ross: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. And the new one that's been added actually is about finding meaning. And why is finding meaning so important? It's because without being able to find meaning in chaos, we have no hope of actually getting through it. We need to find a reason why this is happening. We need to find meaning for the kind of life that we want to live, how we want to move forward. And if any of you have read the book by Dr. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, which I highly recommend if you haven't, he talks about one of the most difficult experiences a human being can go through and how finding meaning was the only way he was able to survive. So I urge you to think about what gives you meaning. Like we just mentioned, we are all going through collective trauma. So what can we see? As again, we talked about, we saw the results of the poll in the beginning. What happens when we all go through this trauma? We experience confusion, anger, PTSD, panic, depression, hopelessness, anxiety, stress, grief, so much more, physical symptoms. And all of these are we're constantly experiencing them. And so going to what we were talking about, Alfred Adler's 2 basic human needs, like we said, we all need to feel like we belong. And before this pandemic, most of us felt a sense of belonging and significance from all the little communities that we belong to. That could be our school, our work, our friends, our family, all of these little circles. We find a need for belonging and we feel significant. So for a lot of us, these 2 have severely diminished. And what Adler said was that when these 2 are not met, we act out. We act out in ways that, like everybody is usually familiar with the iceberg analogy, where you see 20% above the surface and 80% is what's happening underneath. So we're seeing behavior that we have categorized, as we don't understand it, and we see people who are aggressive, who are angry, who are, sad, depressed, all of those symptoms that we just talked about. But what we need to really focus on is what is going on beneath the surface. And it's because these 2 basic needs are not being met. And we have belief about ourselves. We have our thoughts, our feelings, our abilities, and all of these things shape how we behave. And sometimes we don't behave in a way that's actually helpful or conducive to living in society because our 2 basic needs of belonging and significance are not met. So here's some good news. It's not all dark and it's not all gloomy that, okay, so we're aware of what's happened this past year. And we need to be even more aware with this year so that we can help ourselves and help each other get through it. And speaking of getting through it, I actually want to start with number 7 on this list, where we need to understand the number 1 source of suffering. And what's the number 1 source of suffering? According to mindfulness teachings, and mindfulness, I'm sure most people have become very familiar with what mindfulness is all about. And a lot of it is based on Buddhist philosophies and positive psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy. And so the number 1 source of suffering is actually our aversion to pain, our aversion to discomfort. This idea that we are unable or unwilling to move out of our comfort zone. And in doing so, or in actually not doing so, our suffering simply increases. And so it's really important for us to understand and to learn the tools that we need to be able to move through it. Hence the title of this workshop, because if we try to go around it, it's not going to work and our suffering will actually remain. So some of the tools that I can give you today so that you're able to actually work through the suffering and work through the grief that we're all experiencing. For example, you could shift your perception. You could think of this whole time period as a reset. Let's try to reinvent ourselves. Let's figure out how I want to show up to the world. Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? All of those kinds of questions that we can really start to reflect on. You could write a letter. writing a letter could be to a person or even a thing or a time. It could be anything, but just getting out what's inside of us and actually directing it somewhere can be really, really helpful. And a lot of these tools we use especially for doing like grief therapy. We use a lot of these things so that we're able to process this grief and actually move on. Another really good exercise that you can do is taken from Gestalt therapy, where you can do the empty chair technique. And this is a really interesting one where you can just sit in a chair, have an empty chair in front of you, and have a conversation. You could have a conversation with someone maybe who's passed, someone who's alive. You could have a conversation even with, COVID if you want. Whatever you feel that you need to get out, this can be extremely cathartic. Another one that a lot of people are also familiar with is this whole idea of the circle of control versus influence, where you have, those three circles and you want to really figure out, okay, so what can I control? What can I influence? What do I have absolutely no control and no influence over? And in that way, I'm able to just organize my world and understand, okay, so where can I direct my efforts? Create a vision board for your future. Create a vision board for where you want things to go. Where do you want your life to go? How do you want it to look like? And that could be also really fun. And finally, create a shrine for your past life. And I know this could sound a little bit different, a little bit maybe unexpected, but just like we sometimes set up spaces for our loved ones that might have passed, like I mentioned earlier, we are all grieving the loss of an old life. And it's really important to be able to access these feelings and process them and internalize them, and having this shrine as a physical, real space where you can go and have this experience with yourself. Put pictures, put letters, put memorabilia, put objects, whatever you want that you feel can fit this space. And so now it's time to get a little personal. So I wanted to share with you all, what have I been doing this past year so that I can really work on my mental health, on my mental well-being, trying to actually get through this pandemic. So one of the things that has helped, as you can see, this is a picture of my 5-year-old daughter, and she has been an enormous help, both actually personally and professionally. We actually call her the third co-founder of our brand. So having the ability to be able, as you guys mentioned actually in the poll, that spending time with family and of course friends has been immensely helpful. And this has really been a blessing. And the other thing is, and this is what I would love to inspire you all to go out and do, part of this workshop is talking about how we can integrate mental health into our everyday. And that involves how we can integrate it on the personal and the professional level. So professionally, how can you incorporate mental health and mental well-being into your business, whether it's your own business or whether you work for someone, or even if you're a student, how can you incorporate it? And I'm going to invite you to really brainstorm ideas of how to do that, because this year really is a turning point. You can just, the statistics are out there and the research is out there about the effect on our mental health as a result of the pandemic. And many people don't know how long this is going to last, whether we're talking about the pandemic or whether we're talking about our mental well-being that's suffering. So I'm going to invite you to think about how you can do that. And one of the things that I found that I'm really grateful for is being able to shift our business to focus, of course, on SDG number 3 of good health and well-being, where we can use fashion as a tool for social advocacy, as a tool for social impact, where you're able to directly impact people and get them to reflect and get them to look inwards and get them to work on their healing. We were really fortunate to run campaigns where you talk about people's mental health and bring real people in to talk about what they've gone through and the struggles that they have. And this is something I'm really, really grateful for. And putting all of our energy into these kinds of things has helped us be able to get through it and not try to go around it. And so let me leave you today with some words from Mark Twain. When we remember we are all mad, the mysteries disappear and life stands explained. And that's something that I'd love to leave you all with today. Yes, we are all mad in one way or the other. And just like Dr. Seuss said in the beginning, let's try to take things, try to think, look at life in a bit of a different lens, look at it backwards because it did turn upside down this past year. So remember this, remember that this is how life can appear to you, and that the only way that we can do it, as you guys all said already, is that we need to do it together. We need to connect. We cannot do it alone. And so I would like to end by also, excuse me. I would like to share with you the last thing here. Okay, why does this keep? Okay, apologies. Yes. So thank you all for joining me today in this webinar. I hope that you are inspired today to go out and do something, to even give this some thought, to figure out a way that you can get through things. And please, for more inspiration, for more motivation, check out our website from SCARABAEUS SACER and follow my Facebook page On the Mental Swing. And I am so grateful to have you all here with me today. Thank you very much. And I will now take a look at the questions. I'm happy to see that we have left a little bit of time. I apologize if I am not able to answer all your questions, but let me just take a look. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you, Angela, for this question. And the question is, what would you say is the key to solving this mental health crisis? And what do you think about the importance of making therapy more accessible? We cannot talk about this enough, to be honest. I think there's a lot of discussion around the world right now about including mental health care in, for it to be just like healthcare, that, it's they go hand in hand. And I don't want to go too much into this because, like I said, we could spend all day debating this. Sorry. Yes, therapy has to be more accessible. It has to be affordable. We have to remove the stigma around it. We have to definitely start to think about our mental health. That is, it's our mental health. It's just like our physical health. This whole, like I said, this discrimination and stigma around people who seek mental health. And even if you could see from the polls, the amount of people that have actually accessed psychotherapy for a variety of reasons, maybe, is not a lot. And so we definitely need to normalize asking for help. We need to integrate mental health care, obviously, into healthcare plans, make it more accessible, like we said, make it affordable. Because, just like we always use this example, it's very simple. If you have diabetes, you're not going to ignore it. You're going to have to change your lifestyle. You're going to have to do things to be able to keep it in check and to manage it. And you're going to go to the appropriate doctor to help you through it. It's the same thing for your mental health. You're going to, there are people who are trained and they study and they know how that they can help you. So let's see. Okay. Yes. Yeah, I'm very sorry, guys. I will not be able to answer all these questions. However, how can we help change or mitigate the stigma about mental illness? This is actually what we have dedicated all our efforts in doing in our fashion brand. It's an ethical, sustainable streetwear fashion brand. So everything's organic, everything's eco-friendly, but I'm not going to talk too much about the brand. But what's really important here is the social advocacy piece, where we want to use fashion fashion is the second biggest polluter on earth. So we wanted to use fashion as a tool for social impact. And how do you do that? You do that through your designs. You do that through creating campaigns. And that's what I'm saying. Anybody can create campaigns. And because of the lockdown and because of the pandemic, the social media world has definitely boomed more than ever. And so creating campaigns that actually have worldwide reach is a lot easier right now. So create campaigns to raise awareness, bring real people in to talk about their struggles, find ways to actually talk about all of these things that we're talking about. If I'm feeling depressed, if I'm feeling anxious, if I'm feeling like, I'm experiencing symptoms I've never experienced before, normalize it for people to reach out, like we've said. Yes, peer support, connect. Really, I can't emphasize enough how much this year has showed that it's all about connection. And it's ironic because we're really not able to connect, but I think people have now realized the importance of that. And by realizing the importance of it, like we said, hopefully things will start opening up soon. This is not going to last forever. Like they say, the only constant is change. It will pass. And so taking what we've learned and keeping it with us is really, really important. So this idea of connection and this idea of going through it together is the only way we're going to actually survive. Okay, I think we have maybe time for one or two more, depending. Yeah, there's so many questions, but if I can try to answer two of those. What if I can't apply the things that people advise me to apply? And how can we explain mental health problems? Each and every one of you has a responsibility. And whatever you are doing in your life, whatever your age, even my 5-year-old promotes mental health just because she knows what I do and she's constantly talking about it and she gets it, and whether you're 5 or you're 95, just by talking. And this is something else we say with our designs and our pieces, we always say they're actually conversation starters. And that's where it all starts. And I think that's what we're mainly doing even here in this festival. We're starting conversations. It has to start somewhere, and these conversations have a lot of the times been done, behind closed doors or in secret or, just for the people that are interested. But now is the time for all of us to talk about our struggles, to not be afraid, to be compassionate, to be empathetic, to just show care, show interest. I think a lot of us have heard this idea during this pandemic of just, even just send a message. Hey, how are you? How are you doing? Are you good? Is there anything I can help you with? So much that you can do. And that's what, I want each of you to leave this webinar today and think about just one thing that you can do to really integrate mental health into your life and into the life of those around you. So I believe we have 1 minute. Yeah, I think we could maybe end with this one. Can conversation with ourselves be okay? So analyzing our life, identifying the flaws and overcoming it. And, absolutely, you need to talk to yourself. You need to figure out how you can be kind to yourself, be compassionate. Self-care is key, obviously. Admitting our flaws, and maybe not even calling them flaws, but just realizing that we are everything, we are good, we are bad, we are everything in between. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I apologize if I didn't get to any of the comments or questions. The time did fly by. Thank you so much. Maybe perhaps we can continue this conversation elsewhere. Let's do it. Like we said, it's all about connection and starting conversation. So thank you so much. And good luck, everybody. We can do it. Thank you.